You're listening to 17 Carat K-Pop, the podcast that's a little bit of everything with a K-pop twist. From pop culture critiques to the history of K-pop to interviews with people in the K-pop industry and K-pop artists themselves, to concert and album reviews, to a deep dive into the discographies of different K-pop artists, to K-pop news updates, to stories about the music industry more broadly. This show tries to cover everything about K-pop and K-pop as it applies to the larger music and concert scenes. Visit 17caratkpop.weebly.com for more information about the show. That's 17caratkpop.weebly.com. Hello everybody and welcome back to 17 Carat K-Pop, the Epik High special, where I finally gathered my thoughts about the new album and am ready to present to you all my theories about the album, the messages within it, and how they tie back to previous Epik High releases, and how all of their music has played such a big role in the soundtrack of my life, and I want to share just personally how their music has affected me, as well as many other fans for the same or similar reasons. Some context before I begin, though. If you already checked out my BTS dedicated episodes of the show, this will ring a bell. We are going to talk about Carl Jung a bit to set the stage for Epik High's work. Carl Jung is considered the founder of analytical psychology, the father of it. He developed a lot of the concepts that are still taught today regarding analytic psychology, our shadows, our personas, our public versus private selves, various levels of consciousness and self-awareness, all of that. Different types of personalities like introvert, extrovert, etc. Carl Jung is basically the Erving Goffman of philosophy. Erving Goffman is someone we've talked about a lot on artist-specific episodes of the show before, and he's a sociologist who viewed life as theater. He used that analogy a lot. So whatever you wear is your costume, the items in your life are the props, you go front stage or backstage, and your front stage self that you present to the world is this public mask that is different from who you are backstage when no one is watching, when you don't have an audience. He had a theater metaphor for everything. And Goffman and Jung's views go hand in hand, talking about how we present ourselves to the world and how we just all contain so many multitudes that we probably don't even know ourselves as much as we think we do. There's a lot more to it, but that's just a baseline understanding of it. Dr. Maurice Stein is, who actually has taught Carl Jung's lessons for decades now, is the man who compiled all of these 18 volumes worth of Carl Jung's lessons into this big textbook that is still taught all over the world, translated in a lot of languages, and all of that to this day. That book is called Map of the Soul, which summarizes what Carl Jung's teachings are all about. It's about mapping the soul and coming to terms with the self and who you are. As a 75-year-old man, Dr. Stein was a bit thrown for a loop and overwhelmed by the sudden positive reaction he was getting from all over the world when BTS popularized even further his Map of the Soul book because of the Map of the Soul BTS trilogy. Yes, I believe it's a trilogy. That's my prediction. Anyway, Map of the Soul Persona and then Map of the Soul 7 coming out, they were basing this whole chapter of the BTS eras on this school of thought. And so now that it popularized his lessons, Dr. Stein has gotten so much love online and from around the world for his views, and so he's thought about it a lot. And he's decided that Dionysus is kind of that pivotal moment for BTS in that Map of the Soul story so far that is emblematic of escaping the persona trap, which is a concept he describes as like really coming to terms with who you are fully. Epik High also has albums called Map of the Soul, Mapping the Human Soul, Remapping the Soul, etc., that are based on these same trains of thought, discovering that you have all these different shadows and sides of yourself, and each one of those needs a lot of time to address and really unravel. That is what their music has done and continues to do in this never-ending process. Another quick reminder, if you are familiar with BTS's work, this will also ring a bell. Epik High also references a lot this black swan concept, which is basically representing the unknown for yourself, your inner mysteries. Some insights about yourself you have yet to discover about yourself. It also probably brings to mind the 2010 horror film, a psychological horror film about basically your inner demons or just inner selves that are strangers to you. In that movie, Natalie Portman's character is facing her anti-self, her villain, and has to confront it and literally face it, which is a common theme throughout Epik High's work and BTS's, so that's why I draw the comparison here. So as I talk about their work, just know that it can get quite deep, and especially with Epik High's work, if you're familiar with any bit of it, and BTS's, it can get quite heavy at times, so occasionally I may reference feeling depressed or something more drastic that you do when you're depressed, so just a trigger warning for people who don't want to hear certain words used, even just like movie plot wise, if you don't like hearing about a gunshot or killers or any of that, those words may be used in this episode. Fun fact, I actually couldn't go see Epik High on tour last time they went on tour because I was in the middle of a presentation about how Epik High's music has had an impact on my life. I kid you not. That was the circumstance. I want to share an excerpt from my big philosophy paper. This is a separate assignment. I've talked about Epik High in several different big college assignments, actually, which I may link to them, actually, if anyone's interested on my website at some point, if you want to read the full thing. But here is a summary kind of about what their music does and how it's so powerful through a philosophical meets psychological lens. So if the psychoanalytical terminology and phrasing is just weird to you, that's why it was for a class assignment. So here we go. Here's what I said. Quote, I have now described how my feelings of grief, fear, and anger are reasonable and relatable, but I also must insist my feelings that language cannot be used to define are also just as valid as the feelings others have. Sometimes the cognitive component of an emotion, in other words, the reason as to why that emotion is being expressed, is not always known, but that does not make the emotion any less valid. For example, my book details my complex emotional state during times of transition, and how I turned to Epik High's music to feel permitted to not provide an explanation for my seemingly contradictory feelings being held at the same time. The irony of their songs that combine cheerful sounds with sad lyrics made me feel like it is okay to not know how to feel, and that a mix of emotions coexisting is normal and relatable. To say that an emotion is invalid because it lacks a clear reason behind it fails to recognize that humans can have layered emotional states that take time to process, or at least time to learn to handle despite appearing contradictory. After all, the concept of background emotions would be illogical if humans were only capable of feeling one emotion at a time. All emotions are reasonable despite not always being able to specify their cognitive content. Their role in my life is the opposite of escapism. You can't escape forever, and they help me face reality and validate my emotions and the depths of them. They legitimize feeling not okay despite pressure from the outside world to look like everything is fine. Unquote. It's interesting because I talk a lot about how music is my escape. I have a whole essay on my website, shameless plug, about how NCT music is my ultimate escape. But not every artist serves that role in everyone's life. The relatability is an actual therapeutic tool just as much as escapism. So that's what I'm arguing for. Epik High's music is not really the kind you turn to just for a fun mental break, but that doesn't mean it's not also... It still has those healing powers, even if it's not like a put on a happy face kind of vibe to it. It's actually probably more therapeutic in the long run that they don't do that. They are very much against the concept of toxic positivity, which basically is like when you try to shove cheer up messages in someone's face, it's not going to do any good, and they get that. So I've decided to structure my Epik High episode. I wanted to try to get it to around an hour or less, so I decided the best way to get to my main points is to touch on the later albums in their discography more, the ones that are more recent, not the earlier releases, and talk about specific songs on those albums that I think bring home the main points about what is the big deal about their discography, and they all also have a lot of Easter eggs and connections that draw back to their brand new album that we have to talk about as well. So I have a lot of theories about the layered meanings of those albums and everything, but please keep in mind that I'm going to talk about the Shoebox era and the We've Done Something Wonderful eras kind of interchangeably, so if I'm talking about one song and you're like, hey, that wasn't on that album, that was on that album, I know I'm not really doing this in chronological order. I'm doing it in the order based on my thoughts and where they went as I was formulating my overall reflections about their discography. Anyway, let's get right to the songs. In 2017, they released the album We've Done Something Wonderful. Let's start by looking at the lyrics to one of my favorites on the album, Eyes, Nose, Lips, which is their collaboration with Taeyang. You're the victor in this pageantry, but the only trophy you deserve? Catastrophe. I'd rather we be dead to each other. No eulogies said for each other. No rest in pieces. I've been told one day you'll know too much of heaven's a sin, and after the show it's only hell that it brings. So take it slow, and let time heal everything. They say that time flies, but you keep breaking its wings. You wish me well, I wish you hell. This song is all about wishing that the memories would just fade away, starting with your eyes, then nose, then lips, or vice versa order, but basically hoping that the memories of someone in a relationship will fade to black. The lyrics from verse 2, one day you'll know too much of heaven is a sin, it's only hell that it brings still, and also reference to taking it slow and letting time heal everything, but then you keep breaking the wings of time that's flying. That is probably my favorite line and metaphor they use. So just overall dealing with heaven and hell may not be as different as you'd expect, and dealing with those types of spiritual questions in the passage of time. Those are the main takeaways I would keep in mind for my theories later on. My current address, house number on top of a cliff. Time to either shut up and leap out of fear, or scream but make it sound beautiful. I yearned for the days when we were at the very bottom, building towers. Our smiles always wither away before even blooming. But flowers that never bloom still gather to form a garden. Retirement, disbandment, words we've almost let out every year. There are a lot of parallels I see in this song to the stories that BTS has been telling in their story. One being that they are alluding to and using the metaphors of on top of a building or below it, at the top of their game, literally, physically, and then suddenly but the higher you climb to that top of the tower, the harder you'll fall. And that type of language and metaphor was used when Yoongi was singing about his personal demons in the sun's shadow and saying, don't let me fall, don't let me shine, because as I shine, I rise up, and then I have a bigger shadow the more I shine, and more of a fall to deal with. Popularity and just success, and how success comes with its own issues as well as defeat would, because with defeat at least you don't have those high expectations. It also made me think of BTS in the bridge when they comment on how they keep thinking about disbanding, and I just remember that tearful speech BTS gave at a previous award show talking about how they had considered disbanding and had been kind of at that point where they were like, what does all this success mean for us? It feels like we should feel so fulfilled, but there's still some emptiness and we don't know. It was just a very existential crisis moment for them, and I'm so glad. I need more words than glad. I need a better word for it, but words can't express how relieved I was that they didn't disband, and same with Epik High, but them pointing out that it's not all rainbows and sunshine when you get success, I appreciate and think people need to stop and remember about musicians of all kinds. That their life is not all great, even when they gain the success that comes with its own issues, and it's something BTS and Epik High are both bands that are not afraid to address. The song Love Stories, I had nothing, but thanks to the scars you gave me, I became the main character, a reference to this all being some sort of performance that they're putting on. It's a great way to approach life, thinking that you're not a main character unless you go through some sort of trouble, right? Because the character where nothing bad ever happens to them is not the main character of that movie. Do you remember the day we first held hands? I was thankful that your hand that built up and tore down countless things landed in mine. Do you remember the night you told me about your family? It was something only I knew about you. It was raining under the blanket. You used my body as a roof and avoided all the rain of the world. I was drunk even before I had my first drink. I think what we drank was destiny. Back then we couldn't live without each other, but now every day is like a war. We look at each other as if we'll kill each other, then we face the end of our tears. From our first encounter that felt like necessary fate, to our last as we turned around, calling each other ill fate. We were each other's mirror reflections, even until we broke apart from the looks we threw at each other. Thanks to the fear you gave me, I'm forever in a sad love story. Key things to remember from this song are the fact they reference being a mirrored image of each other, them talking about the rain and that rainy night that they met, as well as the references to just this being a movie and their story. And key lyrics that I haven't said yet are, a story that's only special to me, isn't it so cliche? I know I'm not the only one. Basically saying what I'm dealing with is not actually super unique. I know this is from a separate album, but I do want to switch to talking about Love Drunk, because that's also a song with IU. IU in the music video, the actual collaborator is Crush on the song, but IU is still acting in this love story. And so it seems fitting to pick up right there where that other story left off. You can't really see how flower paths are really thorn paths. When I wake up, the last scene keeps repeating every day. The moon is all alone in the soul sky. I'm all alone in this room with only darkness. Though I erased your remaining traces here and there in this place, the feelings still haven't let go of my hand. I would like to emphasize the fact they bring up feeling the weight of the relationship in their hand as kind of a metaphor for actually holding hands. They bring that up again in Love Drunk, which they did in a previous song. I would also like to bring up, they talk about a scene, like the last scene in their minds, like Eyes, Nose, Lips, talked about in like a movie scene type of allusion there. And they reference the moon in the sky, which will make sense later. Maybe after I took off these feelings of attachment that are tougher than eternity, only this drunken frenzy remains. Tears spill out over one drink, then I start laughing like a crazy man. Hurry and pour that poison till it overflows. You've probably gathered by now that they reference getting drunk a lot. And that may sound just like some weird thing that they do, but it really does have deeper meaning because they mean drunk not necessarily in the way you may traditionally think of it, but at a symbolic level, they think about getting drunk on a certain emotion or a certain memory. They use the metaphor of an actual alcoholic drink often when talking about being drunk on a feeling, hence the name of the song Love Drunk. Now let's talk about the song No Thanks, which is spelled with 3 X's at the end. The lyrics I want to highlight include all of the illusions we've already been talking about. Adversity is my counterpart, but I welcome it with a smile. The level you have to reach. Living like a movie. My favorite line in that song is cut down my soul and generously gave away my artistry, because they say it like artist tree and artistry one word, and they're talking about cutting it down like cutting down a tree, your artistry, and giving it to someone. I love that kind of play on words that they're so well known for. And then at the end of that part of at the end of that series of lines, they say, "'Cause I am Groot," and then something I can't say without getting demonetized. But they say, "'Cause I am Groot," and then something funny. So that is just, that whole verse is really funny to me, how they talk about giving away their artistry because they are Groot. It's convoluted, but that's part of the fun of it all. It wasn't just like an off-the-cuff ad-lib. Tableau actually has told the story behind that lyric, saying, "That's why I felt like Groot is a good choice, because if you see the movies, Groot does some extremely horrible things. When he's fighting, he's a scary, imposing character, but at the same time, he's got this innocence where he can turn into baby Groot. That's like the core of that character." In the lines before, I was talking about how I'm like the giving tree. I've had to cut my limbs to give something good to someone else. Simon Dominic has the 4th verse on that song, where he says, "I often find myself dead, murdered after being chased by time," which is an interesting way to treat time as an adversary, as a villain in this movie that they've been referencing throughout their discography up until now. The last song from this era that I really want to spend time with, because it truly to me is the most poetic and summative of their whole storyline and the larger themes within it, is Lost One. "My child, when you follow, look carefully at the path I tread. One day I won't be here to walk by your side. I leave my footsteps here for you. Steer clear of them. Follow those who chose the easy path, for they may have the answer. The path I chose is bent like a question mark, and only gives birth to countless problems. I see that there's not a thing that resembles the eternity, healing, and answers I was looking for. Listen well, even if the whole world welcomes you, that same world will abandon you. So you gotta let go before it's too late, 'cause I've been there before. This path may dazzle your eyes, but don't be fooled by the diamonds and gold. Don't get drunk on applause." See the reference to getting drunk on a feeling again? Sometimes they will use compliments as shackles. Even when they roll out the red carpet for you, don't forget that it has turned red from soaking up your blood and sweat. I hope the dream you dream because of me won't turn out to be a nightmare when you wake up. Now that I've run to the very end, I've learned that the fame and the money don't mean a thing. I lost one too many things. Whatever you wish to become, I'll applaud you. Just don't end up like me. The references to applause, I also think, go along with their larger allusion to this all being a staged performance or a movie or something like that. I pray that your dream is a reachable one. I pray that your dream only shows you the things you can touch, because success takes as much as it gives. Pray that your dreams don't give you something too precious. I pray that your dream doesn't attract attention. Protect it like a secret and always hold your breath, because the world takes as much as it gives. I pray that your dream doesn't only show you the stuff of dreams. Icarus lives. If you recall, Icarus is a story we talked about in one of the BTS dedicated episodes of the show. Long story short, it is a really interesting story about this guy who basically thought too highly of himself, and so when he got wings, he was like, alright, I'm invincible, I can fly anywhere, and I'm just the best ever, and he ended up flying way too close to the sun, literally, and the wings melted. Him saying Icarus lives at the end of this song kind of implies that he still hasn't figured it out. So we figured out, if we're going along with this Icarus metaphor, okay, well, I know what happens if I get too close to the sun, but I also don't know then what to do because I'm already up here by the sun, so how do I get away from it before the wings melt? I guess you could tie it into that time flies, but you keep breaking its wings reference, because now that you're up there, time is flying, you are time. And so when they have these references in their songs to being crushed by time and killed by time, it's like they're killing themselves from within. They're inhibiting their own potential. They're their own worst enemy. So you could argue that this whole time they have been time, or that was what they were thinking of. But also, my other main point before I started down that train of thought, they reference time as going so fast because if you aren't careful, before you spend time to look around and surveil your surroundings, you will be already close to the sun, and it's too late then to bring you back down to a state of humility. It's again referencing kind of like the song Shadow from BTS. The whole concept of if I go, climb too high with success, how do I even get down? That's a really long fall. That is something that I'm scared of reaching. There are a few noteworthy lyrics from this song and this album really overall. One is the fact they reference the rain on your window pane. In 2019, the band released the album called Sleepless In, and I became a certified fool thinking that they were going to reveal the full album title the day before the release or something, and they were just teasing us like, it's called Sleepless In blank, and we'll fill in the blank when the album is about to come out. And no, that's the full album title, Sleepless In blank. You get to fill in the blank. This is the album with Love Drunk, as well as this other song that seems like it doesn't mean much, but it actually has a deeper meaning, I think. Lullaby for a Cat. Literal lullaby for a cat in some ways. Like, fans were posting on social media a lot when this song first came out. Proof that it puts their cats to sleep when they turn on this song. There's the life hack you didn't know you needed. Some key lyrics that I will address more when I tie all this together later are rain tap dancing on the window pane. Rain is referenced a lot in their music, but then they go on to say some bridges were built to burn. That is referencing that you're your own worst enemy concept again, because you are putting gasoline on your own fire. Tuck you in as I tuck another tear behind my eyelids. They reference trying to tuck away a tear behind your eyelids and then say goodnight. And in the song Eyes, Nose, Lips, they talk about trying to have the memories of your eyes, nose, and lips fade away from what they see when they close their eyes, and then they end that song by also saying goodnight. I like the possibly unintentional juxtaposition between the album called Sleepless in blank, referencing a goodnight, and then that goodnight is referenced in a song from the album We've Done Something Wonderful. So they're sleepless, but it also has a connection to the album where they feel like it's wonderful, that they're still aware of these memories, even the painful ones. After the break, let's talk about this brand new album, which is called Epik High Is Here. Today's recommendation is a new book called Pour by Caleb Femi. Here is the official description. In Pour, Caleb Femi combines poetry and original photography to explore the trials, tribulations, dreams, and joys of young black boys in 21st century Peckham. He contemplates the ways in which they are informed by the built environment of concrete walls and gentrifying neighborhoods that form their stage, writes a coded, near-mythical history of the personalities and sagas of his South London youth, and pays tribute to the rappers and artists who spoke to their lives. Above all, this is a tribute to the world that shaped a poet, and to the people forging difficult lives and finding magic within it. The first song from their new album that I want to talk about has to be Rosario, because the visuals really help bring home what the lyrics are trying to say. Epik High revealed they actually were not going to release the song if they couldn't get CL to contribute to it, and upon first listen, I already knew they were totally onto something. I cannot picture the song the same way at all if CL hadn't been the pre-chorus and chorus singer, because, I mean, it's just peak CL, those lines. No one can deliver them like her. And of course, Zico is iconic in his own right as well, so an incredible collaboration across the board with some really dope verses. These lines I will continuously stop to add my annotations because there's a lot I have to say about this song. You came to a rose and left it with thorns when you went away, and everything is a crime punishable by death. All of you must be without a spot of sin. It kind of alludes to The Purge because Epik High has a lot of classic movie references in their work, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was inspiration for that line. But also, it's an interesting way of tying back to their concept they're always singing and rapping about how people who are labeled saints and people who are labeled sinners, at the end of the day, actually are not much different. And so those labels you're giving, they lose their meaning and impact because if everyone is something, no one's really that thing, right? If everyone's a big deal, nobody's a big deal. You have to have comparison levels here. So if everyone is a criminal in some metaphorical way, that no one is a criminal. If everyone's this, no one is that. And that is why they have this complex emotion surrounding the thought of anyone being lionized or the opposite. Because everyone is just human. And so, but then again, if you want to use my own logic against me, if everyone's human, then no one's human. But that means then that everyone is a sinner, or whatever else would be the antithesis of humane, and that also means no one's a sinner. So they're dealing with those complexities of humanity. If you weren't around when I shed tears, you'd better not be around when I'm smiling. I love that lyric. I love that message. If you can't be with someone during their bad days when it's harder to be around them, then don't swing by conditionally. Don't want your prayers, don't want your roses, ain't no one dying today. Zico's verse is probably just like, it seems like any other rap verse to someone who isn't familiar with his work, but as a longtime listener of his songs, I find them extremely clever. Zico is over, yeah, on his high horse, and now he's fallen off, which is a bit of a reference to the horse he rode in a previous music video era. And so it's literally talking about him being on a high horse, but he's also, of course, using that term metaphorically and how people think now he's too cocky for his success. But not even a year later, I swallowed up all of Melon, which sounds weird unless you understand that the Melon charts are a music chart in Korea, and he did swallow up the charts basically with his song, Any Song, that was the hit of last year. It's just such a perfect metaphor for his situation, the fact that that song was literally called Any Song, and so Zico can just release any song, and it will swallow up the Melon charts. If you hate it, come attack me. Don't even know what you're saying, but you keep talking. Hide your identity because you never had one. That seems to be a diss at online trolls. I gave everyone a chance to unbox something real. In defense of his album and saying, look, I put my all into this. It's the chance for you to just see me as a human and, you know, unbox my potential and see that I'm not overly cocky here. I deserve these accolades. And the word unbox being used there is so intentional. His latest album was called Random Box. This song seems on its face to be about haters and people who want to tear you down as you're a successful artist, but I would argue that based on the music video content that it's also about you being your own worst enemy, and those themes are not mutually exclusive. What I think is because in the video, Tableau literally slays himself in the hotel hallway, and then Zico shows up and walks over him, and he's got these cut up hands and stuff, so it looks like he was doing the dirty work. So it just makes me think that you're supposed to infer that Zico killed him and Tableau killed himself. It's a reference to how you're your own worst enemy, and you still have other enemies. So basically, if you want to get advice out of the song, it's that why are you piling on? Because there will always be people out there who don't like you. Don't be one of them. CL is singing in the video about being here to stay, and then she is in the portrait on the wall, and she comes out of the portrait at points and then ends the video back in the portrait, which is a great way to symbolize how their art will live on whether you like it or not. The key lyrics in the song Acceptance Speech, which is a very heavy song contrary to the celebratory title, references to a dual personality within one being, how dark clouds are still clouds. When I think about it, they look at me, a bitter smile is still a smile, being wrapped up in apathy, I did it for you, which is an interesting way to complete this acceptance speech lyrics in the story by saying, it was all for you, and that'll make more sense again with my larger theory. Based on a true story has a lot of connections to the song Love Story, I think, as well as their other songs that reference them feeling like this is a story that we're talking about here. Not an actual thing that happened to you, but it's like a movie or something you're watching. It feels a little bit surreal in a way. I think this story is like mine, you crying in that mirror. Please note the reference to a mirror yet again. I don't know whether to cry or laugh, I'm just nodding my head. Lyrics to the fact that you don't know how much you relate to this, but you just feel something within you that indicates something has been provoked in your spirit, like something that's happening has touched you on a deep level, and maybe you haven't unpacked the reason yet. Mentally, you can't go there yet, but something about this situation is familiar to you. And then with the lyric about I'm afraid with just one pull, all this thread will be unraveled. You continue to, poke the beast here now. All of the trauma you will have to open up and think about. That line about the thread made me think about the Tale of the Red String, which is from 17's music video universe that we talked about on a previous episode, is what it made me think of, and that could be something that they allude to in their work more than once as well. Because Epik High also does talk about the color red a lot, and so red threads, red string, maybe that's what they're alluding to. The Epik High's Here mini documentary on YouTube, which I will link to in my weekly newsletter. Basically what Tableau says is that when you're not doing well, when you're not in a great place mentally, everything feels personal. Everything people are saying or accusing, putting forward in a negative way, you are internalizing and taking it personally. And so you could also then say it feels like it's happening to you. Hence the name of the song, based on a true story. Because you think it's based on a true story, and you're just not sure how much yet. The biggest lyric to remember for later in this episode. You cry instead of me, who doesn't have the power to cry. But the power of crying. Viewing it as an indication of strength and not weakness. The song In Self-Defense points out these unequal circumstances that surround us, with lyrics like, when I look around, everything is either a palace or a gutter. Everybody want to beef for that bread, which that's probably my favorite line of that song, where people are beefing for, let's get this bread is the new way of saying, get that money or whatever it is in your life. Changmo has a verse on this song. He says middle kids like J. Cole, which is a reference to the song Middle Child by J. Cole. And in that song he references, distorted self-image we set up to fail. We are our own worst enemies. Reference, and then ends by saying, money in your palm don't make it real, don't make you real. How we view success is just messed up in society is basically what J. Cole is saying, which definitely aligns with the ethos of Epik High music. Social Distance 16 is naturally a reference to the time we are living in, where we are social distancing right now. Key lyric there, it's okay when the rain is pouring down on my enemies. A reference to rain yet again. Everybody shouts for eternity, but after 10 years, boy, look carefully, who is left? Goodbye, good riddance, bye-bye. Basically saying who's still there with me, and that is something I think a lot of people are thinking about a lot right now, because we are not having, water cooler small talk anymore. The people you are reaching out to and having conversations with are people you truly want to keep a relationship with. So this is a time where people are realizing how many of their relationships may have been frankly superficial, and how many people they truly want to keep in their life that add to it versus just drain them unnecessarily. So looking at the necessity of certain relationships, even at the expense of cutting off others that were toxic or just less meaningful, that is a theme I think everyone is just thinking about this year. So that's why this song is probably one of my favorites from the album, because it's just so universally relatable for this time we're living in and any time in your life, to stop and think, who's still there with you after all that time? The song Wished You Were Here, Tableau has talked about how they named the album Epik High is Here because it's all about making peace with your here. We always wish we were there. And really understanding that here is always changing, but you can define it in a way that feels comfortable and not like you need to escape it, is what he's been learning to create for himself. And he realized that the here he wants to live in, the here and now he wants to live in, as opposed to worrying about time, like they've talked about villainizing the concept of time throughout their work, and how it seems to be their enemy. Putting aside time and just focusing on the here and now has led him to realize that his here is being with his daughter, not worrying about what that makes people think about him. So some lyrics in the song include, my daughter saw the pain and whispered, stay home, Dad, and people's take on that is that I'm washed up. Well, dear, all my peers are drowning in their past, so I'd rather be right here. There's also a reference to pouring rain in that song yet again. There are so many more lyrics in the album I could focus on. A lot of references to living in the moment, putting your phone down to just focus on what's going on, and references to how much we want to preserve memories and photographs and stuff. But while we're doing that, that means that we're not looking up from our phones to just live in that moment fully and capture the memories just with our eyes as opposed to behind a screen that we're taking the picture from. References to curtain closes and other things. Your smile's like a comma. That's another lyric in this album that references. It made me think about the lyric about walking the path of a question mark in life, and now they're referencing a comma. The way they are trying to explain how all of these elements of your life journey can be tied together into a sentence. That's just what it made me think about. If you could tie together different aspects of your life in one sentence, what would it be? Where would the question mark be? It would be based on where you went down the unknown path or the road less traveled. And where would the commas be? Probably in the moments you stop to smile. That's what it made me think about, is how we are completing the sentences of our lives. Hence the name of that album, Sleepless in Blank. They let you complete that sentence of your life. Last song from this album I really want to look at closely is Lesson 0, which is all about kind of going back to the beginning and unlearning things. Things can change in the falling rain. From the shadows, see it towering. I hope you're picking up on all the references to things we've already talked about, because I'm not going to repeat them again, but I think you get where the emphasis should be on these lyrics. Half the light can fade away. Face your shadow, then you follow it. They teach you to fear breaking a law that's already broken. To feel is to be weak, to suppress emotion. They got you hating who you are, to sell you pills and fictions. Reaching for the stars when you were born up there with them. I would like to point out real quick, I know I said I wasn't going to do this, but just because I haven't been repeating it as much, I do want to remind you that references to the stars and the moon in the sky are worth noting. Addicted to the news, views, to keep the visionaries glued to their televisions. Give everyone a voice but leash them with the mic cord. Feed you things to fight about instead of things to fight for. Teach you everything you want but nothing you need. Everything's got a price and nothing is free. They'll turn everything to nothing to make you believe that everything is under control and there's nothing to see. No more lessons. Please take me back to 0. No more teachers. No more prophets. No more heroes. No more lessons, please now. I see the question to all answers will only bring me to my knees and back to 0. I will leave those lyrics to speak for themselves because I think you know what he's trying to say. So tying all of these different details together, the repeated details I asked you to put a pin in for this part of the discussion, the mirrors, the comparisons between angels and devils, and having a harder time than you might think at face value to distinguish between the two of them, and how you characterize people as being more angelic or more devilish. Rain and rainy days, references to putting on a performance, putting on a show, talking about this public persona, this mask that you wear out in public, metaphorically speaking. Rose imagery, the story of Icarus, and dealing with the consequences of fame, the concept of a black swan, and the concept of time as something to be afraid of. This one quote from Tableau perfectly sums up what Epik High is all about and what I'm really trying to say. I'll read the quote to you and then I will explain what my take on it is. Even if you go back to our first album, a common theme that comes up is to be aware of your surroundings. And yes, you can feel like people around you are doing horrible things, and you can point it out and you can rebel against it. You can criticize it, you can fight it, but you too are a part of that process. And we are too. And that might sound like I'm making culprits out of everybody, but what we're trying to say is that because we're all part of that process, we can also come together and create something positive together. We can be part of the process of turning things around. His words remind me of this, I believe it's a Banksy quote that I think about a lot, which is, we blame society, but we are society. Because if you think about it, people will, kind of shake their fist at, society for being materialistic, for being focused on media clicks over deep dives or things like that, for, making criminals out of people who they shouldn't, etc., etc. But every time you critique society, you're critiquing yourself too. Don't absolve yourself of accountability in this picture. We blame society, but we are society. Ultimately, how I see Epik High's music as being a wake-up call is because it is that hope that people might need to remember that they can be part of the problem too. So use that power. Take that power and seize it. Open your eyes to it and don't be afraid to run from it and just escape from it. Because once you see that power, you can also use it for good ends. Equally powerful good means as humans, we will be always faced with those battles between that angel and devil on your shoulder, between whether you want to just picture a sunny day to calm down when really on the outside it's rainy outside. It's all about those moments where you are at a fork in the road in your life and you have to stop and figure out your role in getting that far and then which way you want to turn going forward. And both of those parts together are so crucial for Epik High. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I see their whole discography as reminding people to be very present, and ironically, the more you focus on the present moment, the more you can be reflective of and learn from the past and prepare a better future. So it's all about not running away from what led you to this moment and embracing it. It's all about embracing over suppressing. The struggles and beauty of living in the present moment are so intertwined and you can't disentangle them. It's actually quite clever and insightful, the fact that Epik High names their albums such seemingly simple things. The more universally relatable and then therefore on its face may seem at first glance to be whatever and bland, the more universally relatable those album titles are, the more people can realize their own place in that story. So the stories that Epik High are telling, like in Based on a True Story and Love Story, are our stories. And if we don't like the role we have in them, then we have the power to change that. So you may be wondering what the big deal is about using specific symbols, why keep referencing rain, why reference a rose more than once in their story, things like that. I think it's just all big picture. The repetition is more important to remember than the actual theme, because it's all about stopping to reflect on your past and where you want to go for the future, and it actually being healthy to an extent to not feel 100% satisfied with either of those answers. That reflection, in order to actually be fruitful, has to take into account all of those rainy days, all of those days where it seemed like they just repeat. If the message is supposed to be repetitive, some greater power is trying to compel you to remember something, and that's why it's repeated in your memories, and that is basically how I view what the main character in Epik High's story is all about. And who Epik High's main character is you. It may be uncomfortable at times, that may be exciting at times, depending on what song you're looking at and seeing yourself in. It may be scary at times, but it's all about facing yourself. And then you can use the tools you find within yourself to make the world a better place to actually do that. All of this is best summed up, I think, with some lyrics from their song End of the World. Justice deflects wealth and survives corruption. Teach it like it's natural to be heard as much as a dream. It's an obscure reality that darkens our future. A world where constant desire and selfishness are entangled. For humans, only humans are subject to check. Ultimately, they're saying, after you face society head on instead of running from it, only then can you fix it. So we blame society, but we are society, and that is why we are announcing that we are here, and we need to accept that, and then figure out what space we want to take up and what we want to do with the fact that we're here. So it's all about not suppressing your reality and just coming to terms with it. That is how I see it, but of course it's meant to be widely interpreted, however, depending on whatever personal meaning it has for you, which is the great thing about all music, not just Epik High's. And the story will, of course, always continue because our stories are continuing. Epik High is forever in a way. One more theory that is a lot more out there and lighter to talk about. I reach. That's what I do with these theories. So here I go doing that again. Given Epik High's quirky sense of humor, it's actually maybe not as unlikely, at least as you may first think when you hear it. So here we go. They have a song called Lullaby for a Cat, right? Cats have 9 lives. In the song In Self-Defense, in the outro, Tableau sings, I don't want to have to kill again, eye for an eye. This is number 10, referencing his 10th kill. What if Tableau in this story is meant to be the cat? The cat is Tableau, and he is talking about and singing about himself in that lullaby. He's the cat who realized that he had more than 9 lives. So when he thought he was dead and gone because he was on his 9th life, suddenly someone tried to kill him a 10th time himself. It didn't work. And that's the bottom line, is that just when you think there's nothing left, there's still a greater opportunity for you out there. There could be a deeper meaning here. I know the number 10 has to do with the fact this is their 10th album and everything, but come on, it could have more meaning than that, the number 10 in there. Whenever they reference the number 10, I'm going to go off like this, so be prepared for the future. The bottom line with Epik High's work, aside from all the other bottom lines I've already talked about, is keep asking unless. Get a borrow line from The Simpsons there and say that. Always ask unless with Epik High. This love story is not mine. Unless this cat is dead after its 9th life. Unless Tableau is Groot. Unless. Just always ask unless, and that will probably lead you down a great fun rabbit hole theorizing over Epik High's work. That is really the end of the show now. Thank you, Epik High, for your incredible discography and impact on my life and the lives of so many others. You're really providing a gift to the world through your music, so keep up the great work. Thank you all for listening. Talk to you all again soon.